if you desire. Second, we also want you to ask questions, and you can do this via the Zoom chat, or you can ask live at the end of each presentation, and you know the drill. And also, when you're asking your questions, we want you to show your video so that we can put a voice to your face. So today's agenda will be, Zen will be starting off by talking how can we effectively communicate with cross-functional teams, followed by Yoli, who will be talking about user interface and wireframing techniques. Amaya would end the session by talking about how we can evaluate key performance indicators. We'll then fill out our feedback forms and have a quick photo taking session. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and Zen can start with his first session of the day.
Thank you, Zen,
Okay.
for the systems. And guys, let me add up one more point. If you have any questions, do ask after the session. And thank you so much for the feedback that we have received. We will try to incorporate the comments that you have given, and we are working on it. Okay, you can see the difference today in the presentation. All right, thank you so much, guys.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I hope you all can hear me. Just give me a moment while I share my screen. And if you can't hear me, you can sound out in the Zoom chat right now. Give me a moment. Hi, can everyone see my screen right now? I hope so, yeah?
That's fine. We can see your screen.
All right, that's good. Okay, so today's presentation is on communicating with purpose. Basically, how do you effectively communicate with other cross-functional stakeholders, such as engineering, design, and even marketing, or even the CEO. Yeah. So today agenda will be as follows. I'll do a self-introduction of myself, of my career background. I'll give a quick introduction about Wiki and what we do. And then next, I'll be covering why is it important that you have to be an effective communicator, and how does that contribute to the success of you as a product manager. And next, I will be talking about what is communicating with purpose. What are some of the things that you need to work out for, and what are the examples of it, right? And then next, I will talk about the kind of framework that I use when I go about, communicating with other people. Yeah. And then lastly, we'll end up with Q&A. So a little bit of background information about myself. I graduated from SMU, School of Information Systems. I spent the first 3 years of my career in HPE as a management training program in one of their government consulting business. So in that 3 years, I worked as a software engineer. I worked as a quality assurance test engineer, and also a business analyst as well. So it is at this time that I discover about product management. And I kind of decided that, okay, product management is going to be my passion, it's going to be what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. So I was very fortunate to go on and join Gojek as their PM to help them solve and prevent fraudulent transactions occurring in their business in Jakarta. So while their business is growing, right? And then during my stint there, my 2 years in Gojek, I built up an anti-fraud analytics platform that is used across all verticals in Indonesia. So food delivery, right, and then so on and so forth. And then I went on to launch Gojek in Singapore and grow the. Hi. Sorry. Those. So can you just mute yourself? Yeah. Correct. So I went on to launch Gojek in Singapore. I grew the weekly active user base from the initial thousands to millions in Singapore. It was a lot of fun during these 2 years in Gojek, working very closely with data analytics, and also running all kinds of experiments to identify growth levels. So after 2 years in Gojek, Vicky found me, and here I am managing 2 product swim lanes. So just to give you some background about what Wiki is about, basically, Wiki is an entertainment company. We stream Asian content. So K-drama fans would definitely have heard of Wiki. We have a really strong library of Korean dramas and movies. And in our platform itself, you can also find hundreds of titles across the globe, such as shows or movies from China, from Philippines, from India. Therefore, so if you have if you want Asian entertainment, interested in K-drama, do sign up on our platform, try using it. Otherwise, if you have friends who is interested in working for the entertainment company, where we have presence in US, Korea, Japan, and Singapore, do check out the career page. All right. Okay. So now, let me first talk about why it is important to communicate with purpose. Being a product manager, you are in the intersection of user experience, technology, and also business as well. However, being a product manager, when you are managing your product team, you don't have formal authority over the people in your team. You are not their boss. However, you are responsible for the success of the product that you're managing. So that puts you in a tricky position, right? How do you communicate with people effectively, so that they are willing to do what you tell them to do? How do you make good decisions? How do you come about making good decisions? You have to realize that you are not going to be the expert in user experience. You are not going to be an expert in tech as well, right? In engineering aspect of it as well. You are going to rely on the people that you work with on a daily basis, and a significant portion of the time is spent on collecting insights from these people that you work with, right? That helps you to make better decisions about your product. And of course, given that you have no formal authority over them, you have to also persuade them, to make them really want to work on the product and do the best for the product, right? So all in all, communication is really important for a product manager. Having a clear and purposeful communication method make you less prone to ramblings, and thus, people are going to communicate with you more because they can understand you better. They and your communication is more effective. Hence less time is being wasted. Right. So once you being a skilled communicator will help you to become more effective and efficient at communicating, and hence it will result in a meaningful exchange of ideas and gathering of high quality insights, that can be funneled into your decision making process and make people do their best for your product. Okay. So as a byproduct of being a good communicator, most as a product manager, right, is going to help you to find the right problem to tackle on, right? Without effective communication, the risk is higher that you are going to tackle the wrong problem or even tackling the problem in the wrong way. And that means building things in the wrong way or building things that is doesn't help the business, that doesn't help the users, right? So it is really very sad for you and your team to pour all your hours and efforts to do something and then realize that it's all for nothing, right? So yeah, so effective communication is really important. So next, then we start to define, what exactly is communicating with purpose, right? So communicating with purpose is explaining to people, why they should care about what you are saying, right? Instead of telling them, hey, I use Mixpanel to collect user clicks in the shopping cart page, and then take the data, blah, 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 put it into Tableau to create a pie chart, a bar chart, and histogram. This is telling them what you do. This form of communication is not going to help you. It's not going to help them realize, why they should care about what you're saying. why uh, why they should why they should listen to you. So instead of telling them what you do, tell them, how you are going to help them, how you are going to provide a meaning for the work that they are going to do. So it's going to be like, I know your team is helping customers to find more related product recommendations. And therefore, we conducted an investigation that reveals 87% of customers is going to select product of certain price range. So structuring like that kind of make people understand what you are saying and what you are doing, right? And that is how you're going to get their attention. And that's how you're going to motivate them to do what you ask them to do. And next, so next, many of the times, right, you tend to miss the forest for the trees, right? You tell, especially when you work with data, you find yourself, talking about different charts and different data points. Like what you see here, 23% of drivers click this notification, 50% didn't say it, 90% didn't do something, right? It's very easy to be caught up with the details, and just get caught up with rambling on all the data points, right? So instead of, telling people what the data, telling them like 23% blah, 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 tell them what is the insight that you have gathered, right? Start with the forest, which is notification is simply not an efficient way or effective way to contact, certain drivers. X% does not see them, right? So when you're communicating like this, you're helping them to make sense of the data in a short amount of time. And then you allow them to question and challenge any insight that you have presented earlier based on your charts, based on your data point, right? Many of the times, especially when it comes to data, it's all about context and perspective. I won't go too much into that, but when you work with data, this is definitely the way that you should go for. Tell people the insight and then let them digest the insight, then let them slowly question your data, how you gather, so on and so forth. And then next, once you have done the above two, right, be sure to understand also that communication is a two-way street. You have to practice active listening, right? It's not simply about you talking. You need to give people time to digest what you say. You need to answer their questions. Communication is all about bouncing off ideas with each other, especially in the context of a product manager working cross-functionally. Right? As a product manager, you don't know anything. You don't know. You don't have the expertise in UX or business. So therefore, if you have any questions, don't be afraid to ask stupid question. Right? Don't think that any question is stupid. Be okay with yourself asking any question where you don't understand or you have doubts. Trust me, like this is going to be so much, helpful, so much better down the line than, looking stupid when you realize that you have gotten everything wrong. Yeah. And then the second point is, it is okay to keep asking questions as you go along. Many of the times it's all about context, about identifying what kind of perspective that they are coming from. What is the UX designer thinking? What are their considerations in terms of the user experience? In terms of engineering, why do they make certain decisions? Why do they push back on some decision? Keep asking questions and make sure you really understand what they're saying, because all this is going to be very important for you next time when you make product decision. Right? And then also, you will realize that when you become a product manager, you are going to get product features or ideas from everywhere. Your UX designer, your business stakeholders, marketing, customer service support, everywhere. They are just going to bombard you with product features and ideas, right? Therefore, it is not okay for you to work on something without first understanding why, right? Question every ideas that people give to you. Question every problem that they presented to you. It's really important as a product manager that you understand what problem they are saving. what problem they're solving, and what kind of benefits it brings to your users, and also it brings to your business. At the end of the day, product manager, we are there to uh, ensure that we solve user problem, and also we ensure that our business survive. We generate healthy revenue and profit, right? And then the last thing I would say is, it is it is however, the same question, right? It is not okay to ask it for the third time or the fourth time, so on and so forth, right? Every time you communicate with people, you ask question, it is important that you take down the notes, um, the, the first and second time, right? This is going to reflect a lot on you as a product manager, right? If you don't bother to take notes, it can be seen like you are wasting their time. You are not taking them seriously. So be sure to always take notes wherever you have asked questions. Right. So lastly, now I will talk about, what is the framework that I use usually when I communicate with my with 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 the product team. Right. So the first thing that I always take note of is, what exactly is the issue, what exactly is the problem that I'm trying to solve on hand. I will be clear and concise with my messaging so that, immediately people understand, hey, what we are trying to do here. Secondly, consider who is your audience, right? Not everyone communicates in the same way. As you realize, as you become a product manager, you're going to realize that UX designer communicate very differently. Engineers communicate very differently as well. They have their own considerations, they have their own perspective, right? Some of them, they care about the users more. Some of them, they care about the business impact more. Some of them, they just care about, what new technology that they get to work on, right? So when you're communicating with people, when you're communicating with your audiences, make sure that you consider their background. Make sure you consider what is going to motivate them. Make sure that you don't use jargons that they don't understand, right? It's all about aligning and make sure everyone is on the same page. That's the second point. And then third, consider your objective. When you're communicating with people, are you looking to inform them? Are you looking to persuade them into something? Or are you going to request them to do something for you, right? That so given your objective, the style of communication is going to be very different. Yeah. And that's why for effective communication, for me to go into this, there's like many ways, which is going to drag on the presentation. I'll, however, say that, go read out on some books, to understand, what kind of communication style you should use when you're trying to do each of these actions. Okay. And then lastly, at the end of every communication, or even, in between the communication itself, always check for understanding, right? Always observe, people when they are talking, when they answer a question, when you answer their question, do they really understand you, right? You have to watch out for verbal or visual cues. All these are very important, right? And every time you felt like, they didn't quite understand, provide an opportunity for your audience to react to your message. And then, if possible, clarify. Yeah. So this is very important to make sure that, everyone walks away from the communication with the same understanding, with the right understanding. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm gonna guarantee you there is going to be a lot of trouble for you at the end of it. Right. So yeah, I've come to the end of my presentation. Uh, if you all have any question, if you have any question right now, now is the time to voice out your question, and I will try my best to answer them.
Guys, please feel free to unmute yourself and then ask the question. Hey, hi, Jolene. We have received your question. What's the difference between Scrum Master, Product Owner, and Product Manager? We'll take it at the end of the session. Okay. If you have any questions pertaining to Zen's session, please ask it now. We'll take the additional questions.
Hello.
Hey, hi.
Hello. Hi, I'm Madeline. Can you hear me?
Yes, Madeline.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so I'm curious, right? So how do you deal with, because we're talking about communication, so how do you deal with things such as maybe authority bias? Let's say, for example, if your stakeholder is communicating to you like a product feature that they wish to prioritize, but you think so like otherwise. So in that case, like in this kind of circumstances, then how would you ensure effective communication to the other stakeholders?
Yeah, so wait, your question, I kind of missed the last few sentences a bit because there was some disruption. Do you mind just repeating the last two sentences? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. So I was talking about how when it comes to authority bias, how do you make sure that you communicate effectively to your stakeholders to align, let's say, maybe the product features or improvements moving forward?
I see. So I think like you're saying that, okay, what if some business, some some other some other teams, like maybe marketing team, say that, hey, the product feature that I'm asking for is more important than what you're doing right now. So can you work on whatever that I asked for? I mean, is that the situation that we're talking about? Yeah.
Yes.
So in this case, right, that's why as a product manager, it's more of like providing everyone with the context, you know. There must be a reason why you're doing the thing that you're doing right now, right? Or you choose to do something over what they're doing. So most of the time, what I will do is I will state very clearly in the product requirements document. That's one form of communication that you need to do as well. PRD, product requirements document, to ensure that that it captures what benefit that your current feature is going to bring to the table right now, and why is it important to do so, right? Take for example, right now you need to work on feature A, given that it's going to give you access to $1 million, right? And then and then working on another feature is probably going to only generate a revenue of maybe say 500,000, right? So this kind of communication, putting it in terms of business perspective, right? You're doing something right now because it's going to bring immediate business benefit to the business, and that is the right way to do so. So I hope I answer your question. In summary, present your be ready to justify what you're doing right now with clear business matrix, and also the strategic kind of like a angle to it, so that people can understand why you are doing so. Most of the time when you present these two data points to them, they will clearly understand that, okay, it makes sense, right? That's why you're doing what you're doing.
Thank you. So just to check, is that like what we call like data storytelling, like using numbers to kind of prove your point and why you think that the feature we should be developed first is like of priority?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Guys, so keep up your questions. We'll move on to the next session, and then we'll open the chat window to take up the questions at the end. Is it okay? Next is going to be a live demo.
Oh, okay, sure. Okay. Violin, I will take your question at the end of it.
Yeah, sure. Okay. So Yoli, over to you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Zen.
No worries.
Okay, hi. Let me share my video as well. So my video and my audio are in different channels now, but still you can see me if you are using the desktop version. So I'm Yoli. I'm a project and product manager in Rakuten. Sorry, I didn't prepare the page about my background, but before becoming a project manager, I used to be a software developer. First full
Surely, are
stack.
you sharing the screen? We can't see.
Not yet.
Oh, not yet. Okay, okay, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, first I used to be a full stack web developer, and then I specialized on UI development, and I joined Rakuten 6 years ago as a front-end developer, but then after 1.5 years, I changed my career direction and became a project and product manager. So here, let me share my presentation about the wireframing. 1 second. It doesn't match. Okay. So, wireframing is like a visual representation of how your application or website will look like. And today I will share with you everything I know about it. But I want to start my presentation with this quote of Hiroshi Mikitani, who is the CEO of Rakuten, from his book, Business Tool, The Way to Successful Leadership. Once you have decided to do something, do it quickly. The best thing to do is to act. To act is to think. In order to think, I act. Sounds a little bit complicated, but let me explain how this relates to my today's topic and why I think this is a really insightful thing. So the nature of our thinking process is very abstract. So our thoughts are stored in our mind as abstract images before we actually translate them into words or drawings. And you can actually spend a lot of time thinking about how your website or application will look like. But if you haven't documented your thinking process, then this time will be almost, I would say, wasted. Because once you start visualizing it, you have to think through each element again, basically. So it will be just going through the same thing again, duplicated work. So what I recommend is don't spend too much time on just thinking alone, but instead do it in parallel with the visualizing the solution that you are building. Actually, this process is even more satisfying than thinking itself, because already in few minutes you will have some physical outcome of your thinking process, which can be already demonstrated and discussed with your team. One more advantage of this thinking through visualizing, exactly what this slide says. In order to think, I act. So one more advantage of this thinking through acting or visualizing is that our thoughts got routed to the correct direction, and less likely you will slip into daydreaming, basically. And one more funny thing about the nature of our thinking process. So I think most of you sometime in the past have been in the situation when you have some pretty good idea, and it sounds really brilliant in your mind, but after you voice this idea, after you hear it, you think like, how come in my head it sounded so much better than than after I actually said this. So this is, as I said in the beginning, because our thoughts are stored in our brain like abstract images. It is sometimes difficult, challenging to critically evaluate them. So to make sure that your thoughts actually are not delusional and they can be fully applied to the reality, this thinking through visualizing really helps, because immediately your thoughts will face this reality check, and you can make sure that they are as brilliant as they sound in your head. So a summary, what I wanted to say on this slide is when the time comes to wireframing, to create wireframes, just create them without much thinking in advance. You can always improve them later on. So don't try to create any perfect representation in your brain first. Just go straight to creating. Yeah, and we go to the next slide. So what is the wireframe? Wireframe is a two-dimensional skeletal outline of a web page or application. Wireframes provide a clear overview of the page structure, layout, information architecture, user flow, functionality, and intended behaviors. Wireframe represents the initial product concept, therefore styling, colors, and graphics are kept to a minimum. And wireframes can be drawn by hand or created digitally. So let's just proceed to the examples. I want to highlight that wireframing is a step, and this step only goes after you already decided which functions will be there on each page of your application. This has to be at least drafted, because it might change during wireframing, but at least you have to have something to start with. So you straight away opened the wireframing tool, and you want to design your login page. And in your list, you have such functions that have to be on this page. User input for email and password, login button, the function to create a new account, and the function to reset forgotten password. And then don't try to make it perfect on the first attempt. Just put everything and then look at it. Okay, it already looks like a functional login form, even though it is not very perfect. But then you already can imagine, if you were a user and you used this form, you can go through the user scenarios and see, is it convenient, is it doable, is it clear or not for the user. So first scenario is should be always be the success scenario. When user remember their email, their password, they already have account with this website, so they input their email, input their password, click submit button, perfectly, everything works. This scenario works well. Second scenario, for example, the user forgot the password. You input your email, and then when you are asked about the password, you realize that you forgot your password. Then you need to look through the whole page to find, is it even possible? Is there such a function to reset password? So you read this line first, it doesn't suit you, and then in the very, very bottom, you find, okay, reset password. So maybe this is not the best place for this function. we don't want our user to waste time to look through everything to find the needed function. So maybe this button reset password has to be near the password field. But then you think, okay, but this button is so big, and then it will look like it is one of the main functions on this page, though the main function is actually login button. So maybe we just make it less noticeable. For example, it can be a link. And the same way you think about the registration, and after some adjustments, you can already improve significantly your design of the login page. So this is already something that can be approved. So some more examples. If your application will be cross-device, or you designing application for mobile, for example, then of course the wireframes have to be different for every device, for if it is for browser or for iPad or for mobile. So for each page, you will have a different set of wireframes for each device. So the next topic is why do we actually need to do wireframing? As a proverb says, it's better to see something once than to hear about it 1,000 times. I absolutely agree. And as I already talked in the first slide of this presentation, that the wireframe actually gives the visual representation of the abstract picture that you can explain. Even if you explain it perfectly, you cannot really guarantee that your user or your teammate imagines same in their head as you imagine and you describe. Second point is almost the same topic. Wireframe gives us wireframing is kind of a common language. What do I mean? For example, as already in Zen's presentation, he said that like developers talk on one language and the business talks on another language. If you are presenting your idea to the customer who is not a developer, and then you say, okay, on the left there will be some simple product filtering, and here on the right we will put image gallery. For you it totally makes sense, but for your customer it can be just what he's talking about. He cannot even imagine, or he can imagine, but absolutely differently from what you expect. But when you are presenting a wireframe, you can say here on the left, you can see some simple product filtering, and then your customer already understands, okay, this is what he meant by product filtering. And next time when you talk about this element, you can use the common name, common terms between each other to have the common understanding of this component. Number 3, objective look at usability and opportunity to improve while creating, while demonstrating. So this is something I talked about when I showed how we can improve the login page, which we are creating even during we create. We already can introduce improvements, and the second wave of improvements will be introduced after other people see it, and then they can provide a feedback about what you never thought before, and it will help you to improve it even further, especially when you have opportunity to present the wireframes to the end user itself. Then it can help you to understand much better how your end user will be using your product, and what will be really convenient for him or her in your interface, and what is not clear, and what is even understood totally wrongly, and stuff like that. Number 4, does everything fit? So this has two topics inside. It's about the static content and dynamic content. For example, on your website, you want to have 8 menu entries, and your menu is horizontal. And in your mind, you thought should be fine, but when you start wireframing, you realize only 5 can fit. Then, of course, you need to rethink. Either maybe you will combine something together, or you will change names, or whatever. And this is not only about static content. So also the content, the dynamic content itself. For example, if you are designing a messaging app, and then there can be a list of chats. For example, on the left. And then when you design and when there are 10 chats, it looks perfectly. If it is 1 chat, it looks perfectly. But what if it is 500 chats? And then you already start thinking, maybe I need to introduce a search function as well, because it is really difficult to navigate in 500 chats. So while wireframing and while testing your scaling ideas during wireframing, it also can help you to improve the usability of your product. And number 5, so we need to do wireframing. Maybe it is one of the most important points, because the cost of mistake, or the cost of the gap in the vision on how your customer sees the product and how you see the product when you are reading same requirements. So the cost of this becomes much less if we are doing wireframing. So imagine the unfortunate situation when you already finished your product entirely. So the development is done, the testing is done, and you are showing the demo to your customer, and your customer says, actually, it's not what I imagined, it's not what I was thinking about. Can you imagine how much work have been wasted? It's the work of developers, QA testers, managers, and everybody else, the whole team. If it actually also means that you never presented the realistic designs to the customer as well, like in Photoshop or something, because customer would see on the design pictures how it will look like, and he can highlight in the early stage. But if we already prepared these realistic designs based on wireframes or just from scratch, it will mean that a few days of work of designer has been wasted if the customer doesn't like these designs. Like not it's like he's complaining about color, but he says like this function is totally a mess, and this cannot be understood by user, and this is total nonsense, and this is not needed at all. It means that you need to redo a lot on this point. So you wasted few days of one person. But if this mismatch was found on the step of wireframing, it is just a few hours of work will be wasted, which were actually spent on wireframing itself. And then after you approve the wireframe, it means the concept is already stable, and then we can proceed with the realistic designs. Okay, tools. The tools can be very various. So wireframing is a technique. It is not a brand or something. So it can be done by many ways, and all of them are correct if they help you to achieve the purpose. So tool number one, the free one, paper or whiteboard. Yes, so if, for example, you have some brilliant idea in the middle of the night and your computer is switched off, just take a paper and start drawing the wireframe. Or when you brainstorming with your colleagues, use the whiteboard, and it will be very effective. If you want to say that you don't have any drawing skills, then look at this example on the slide. How fancy is this? So you can see that no drawing talents and skills are required to draw wireframe. It is super schematic. You don't even have to draw exactly straight lines everywhere and make it super accurate. And even this, what you see on this page is much better than nothing, and gives you something to discuss with your team and to start with. Number two, sometimes you will not really have a choice which tools to use, because in your company there will be already pre-installed tools that are purchased by your company. So in Rakuten we use Glyphy diagrams and Balsamic. In most cases these tools will be good, because company of course carefully compares all the products on the market and then select what they will purchase for their business. If you are not working for company, if it's your own startup, or you can choose any free or paid tool that you can find in Google if it suits you, if you like the design and you like how easy it is to work in this tool. And now I want to show a quick demo of the Balsamic tool, so you can see how actually easy is to create wireframes. So this is the screen of the Balsamic, the canvas. It has many instruments. They are also grouped here on top. For example, we create the login form. Then I will go directly to forms, so I can find quick what I need. Input, another input, and it also helps me to align automatically like this. Then some texts, for example, username. Oops. There should be some more little text. Okay, there is another tool for this one. Small text. Passwords. Then again, I can beautifully align together. Then I need a button. So can rename it, login. Okay, and basically in the same way, you can add whatever you want. For example, you want to have some advertisement on this page, then you can imagine that there will be some images here below, and there will be some name of the product, some maybe this will be maybe price, and this will be the link to the product and stuff like that. So you can totally visualize what you want to see on your page. And same easy if you want to make the wireframe for iPhone, for example. I choose iOS, and there is iPhone, really big. Then we can visualize something. For example, here is a keyboard. How it will look like with the keyboard. So a lot box. So there are many predefined elements which you can use. So you don't have to make them from scratch. Also, it has many templates which you can download and use as well, which people created, like some diagrams, charts, different search boxes, anything most likely you can find what you're thinking about. So the creating of the wireframe really doesn't take a lot of time, but for sure it has a very big value and a very proper reason to do it, and never skip this step. So this is the end of my presentation, and I can take the questions if there are any. Okay. So you can hear me well, right? Let me see which are the new questions. Janani, can you?
Hi, Julia.
We don't have any new questions on the chat box, so guys, feel free to ask in here.
Yeah, can you hear me? This is Sunil.
Yes.
Yes, Sunil.
Yes.
Yeah. So my question is, as a PM, usually we have to wear multiple hats, and for an aspiring PM, what skills is more what skills does take more precedence over one? Like, where do you place wireframing and designing skills for a PM? Is it a must-have
Among what?
or good to have?
I think it is not difficult to master. I think from the first attempt you will succeed in it. It doesn't require some special skill. Of course, after you make it few times, you already become an expert in wireframing. Especially if you can get feedback quite soon, then you will know how to improve in this.
Okay. And in case of an absence of designer, who will be our stakeholders for a PM?
In the absence of designer?
Yes. I mean, let's say in the absence of designer, product manager has created a wireframe. Who, with whom will he be testing this or will be cross-verifying on this?
It depends from product to product, because sometimes if it is a startup, for example, and there can be even no stakeholders, so we will try to find some real users for that after we already exhaust our team capabilities. If it is a big company, if there is a customer, then customer himself can be evaluating, or also can provide some real user to us. So it really depends.
Okay, I think I got
from
it.
product to product.
Okay, thanks, Julia.
Hi.
Hi. Yes.
This is Guangxuan over here. So I have a question for you. This is more regards to UI UX and wireframing instead of PM. So my question is that in like when we have multi-platform type of product we want to launch, for example, the web, the apps, iOS and Android, and even the web itself, there's a lot of, we need to design a responsive web app. So in that scenario where there are certain different dimensions for the screen size, is there any preference or recommendation you would actually give to, where should, say, a UX designer start to design first? Should we start from the web or should we start from the app? Yeah.
Maybe if the version which is more important for this project, I would start with it.
Right. So
Like
meaning
if
to
you
say,
expect most of your users will be using it as an app, especially now there is such a tendency that it is either app or mobile browser, then I would start with these two.
yeah,
Maybe
but
yeah,
sorry.
maybe we even never maybe we even start with launching only one version first, like app.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, but in the scenario where, say, the CEO or they want to launch all three at once, the responsive web and both the apps on the different app stores, in that scenario where all the weightage are equal, is there any, say, preferences you would actually begin with?
No, if in the end we still need to do all, then the order doesn't matter.
Right. All right. Thanks.
And
Thanks
just
for your.
based on your experience, if you prefer to start with web, start with web. If you prefer to start with application, start with it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you, Yoli. It was really very interesting, very useful session. Thank you. So we'll move on to the next session with Ameya. Hi, Ameya. Over to you.
Hello, everyone. Everyone can hear me, right?
Yes.
Jenny, you can hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
And you can also see the screen?
We can hear you and see your screen as well.
Okay. So thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Ameya, and I would be talking about product evaluation and KPIs from the context of a product manager. So first, I would give you a very brief introduction about myself. I did Bachelor's of Engineering in Computer Science many years ago, and I did MBA from UCLA and also from NUS Business School. I have been working for a little over 14 years in very, very different roles so far in the tech industry itself. And currently, I work as group manager for Rakuten, and I look after Rakuten Web Search product. Below shows some companies that I've worked for so far. Of course, most prominent and nice company is Rakuten, which I work for currently. Okay, so let's start with the presentation. So first of all, there are so many products around us, and every day we use one or more products from different companies, be it Netflix or Amazon or Rakuten itself. But then how do we define whether a product is a successful product or not successful product? And I think there are various parameters to assess whether a product is successful or not. First parameter could be market attributes and demographics. For example, how much is the market share of the product? How much is the share of wallet, or how much competition the product faces? Second parameter could be some monetary aspects or financials. For example, how much revenue is the product making, or how much is the profit margin or profit per user? Another parameter could be users' behavior, because all the products are actually designed for users, be it B2B or B2C products. So how are the customers feeling? What is the monthly active users? How many users are actually using it? And retention rate, which tells us how many users are actually using it on a regular basis and returning back. And there's one term which is very popular these days to define whether products are successful or not, and it's called NPR, which is Net Promoter Score, which simply measures if I have a user using the product, will the user be willing to recommend the product to his friends or his circle or not? And that is one of the definition to define whether a product is successful or not. Going forward, we would discuss what is the KPI. So KPI stands for Key Performance Indicator, and it is used to measure how a product is doing. So it would help people understand how a product is performing. All the parameters and attributes that we saw in the previous slide could all be termed as a KPI, which means that to understand whether a product is doing good or not, you could see whether the customers are happy or not, whether it is making money or not, or how much market share is the product acquiring, could all be indicators of a product's health, and also could also be used as a KPI to measure its health. There are some very simple attributes of a good KPI. First is that it should be simple to understand, which means that it should be a simple number. It should not be a very complicated formula, which takes long and long hours to compute. It should be very simple to understand, visualize, and calculate as well. Second is that it should be very relevant, which means that it aligns with the objectives of the product. There is no point in measuring KPI of payments in Netflix, because Netflix is a video streaming service. So it is essential that the KPI that we're trying to measure actually aligns with the objectives of the product and the problem that the product is trying to solve. Another attribute is that it has to be actionable, which means that it has to be practical, and it is possible to improve those KPIs, track those KPIs. It should be measurable in terms of comparability and timeliness, which means that I should be able to compare the KPI with some time ago and measure whether it has improved over the time or deteriorated over time. And one more attribute is that it has to be specific, which means that it focuses on the achievement rather than something else, which means that it has to be focused on the objective that you want to accomplish. All of that might be very vague, which is why let's look at some examples of KPIs. So KPIs might be used by different departments in the organization. So it is not necessary that only product managers create KPIs and they would track them, but then different departments in an organization might be using KPIs. For example, a sales team might want to track how much is the revenue or how much revenue is forecasted, which means how much revenue we are expecting in the next month, next quarter, next year. There could be certain KPIs that help us understand users' life cycle, which could be like customer acquisition cost, which is like how much money do we spend to get a new customer. It might also help management understand how the products are doing by telling them how much is the operating margin and how much profit the product is making. It could also help customer support team in trying to track how much is the average response time of the customer support team, how much is the customer satisfaction rate, and so on and so forth. It could help procurement department, it could help human resources, marketing, finance. So each and every department could come with KPIs, and they might get help to better track the overall health and progress of a particular product. I would give you some examples of KPI in tech in particular, because Rakuten being a tech company, most of the mentors would be more comfortable sharing their own experiences. So in terms of project delivery, some KPIs that we track on a daily basis or on a weekly basis would be how many tickets are being worked on and how many tickets are closed, how many tickets are we turning around per sprint. So tickets are nothing but a small chunk of tasks that anybody might be working on. It could be testing team, it could be engineers. So how many tickets are we closing, which means that how much of task are we completing every day. This could be a project and delivery related KPI. How many projects are completed on time and on budget. So this could be project success that we could be tracking via KPI as well. What is the throughput of new feature development? This means that in a given year or in a given quarter, how many new features am I adding to the product? And it could also be return on investment, which means that for any given product, how much is the cost, which means how much time, how much of resources do we need to put in versus how much of return do we get on by doing that product. These are some of the KPIs that a project manager might track from project and delivery perspective. There could also be certain KPIs that we might be tracking from a system and infrastructure perspective. And these KPIs could be tracked by a product manager or project manager or even engineering leads as well. For example, how much is the availability? How much is the server downtime? So what percentage of time was the service available and accessible to the end consumer? and how much was the server downtime, how much is the error rate. Typically, error rates should be less than 1%, and could be as low as 0.1%. How much is the max QPS supported, which means how many requests or how many queries can the system handle at a given point of time. This is also a measure of how many concurrent users can the system support. So this could be certain KPIs that could be telling us about the health of system and infrastructure. So coming back to the main question of why do we want to track KPIs, and the main purpose is to be able to quantify the undetermined or unspecified things. For example, how do we make a decision whether a project is done on time or not, or whether I should prioritize project 1 over project 2 or not? So ROI could be the KPI that might help me prioritize project 1. Whether I should spend more money on advertising, or whether I should do some partnerships. I think certain other KPIs could be used to understand where it is wiser to spend the money on. So being able to quantify and make decision is one purpose of defining KPIs. Second is to correlate with processes. So for example, if we are doing a QA cycle, we want to measure how is the process doing? Is there any need for improvement on those processes, and relevance for what you wish to measure, which means that a lot of times there are a lot of things which are non-measurable. For example, whether consumers are happy with the product or not. And if you go to a psychologist, probably they would say that there is no measure on happiness of a human being. But using KPIs, you could measure whether the people are happy or not. Consumers, you can take consumers' feedback in terms of ratings, in terms of feedback, and you can try to measure the overall happiness on an average level of all the consumers that are using your service or your product. KPIs are also very relevant for management because they helps them understand the activities and performance of the products or services in general. That also helps them set targets for next month, next quarter, or next year, or even 5 years down the line. And it also helps management measure the progress over specific areas of interest. For example, how is a particular service doing as compared to the competition? How is a particular product performing over 2 years ago? How is the industry taking shape? So all of these information management can receive by tracking these KPIs. And also KPIs help a lot on communication because you could use those KPIs to do a clear progress reporting on how much tasks were done, how much is the progress, how much of a feature is complete, or how much users are satisfied. It could also help in marketing, branding as well. For example, you must have heard that this is the, I think you must have heard Apple saying a lot of times that our iPhone performs 2 times faster than previous iPhone. Those are nothing but the KPIs on performance of the CPU. So I think this could help in branding of a company image as well. And it could also substantiate qualitative descriptions. So a lot of times when we are not able to measure the undescribable, for example, voted #1 brand by consumers, it clearly indicates that consumers are happy with the product. And that helps everybody understand that this is one of the most loved products by the consumers. So certain KPIs could help us better communicate to the audience as well. How do we derive KPIs? So how would I understand as a product manager that I should focus on KPI 1 or KPI 2 or KPI 3? So ideally KPIs go all the way up to the management, where senior management, where we have a vision, mission, and values, which is defined by the senior management or executives of a company. Then that derives the strategies, and that defines objectives and KPI scores. And that is help that finally derive strategic initiatives, which might be certain projects to improve those KPIs. And finally, when those strategic initiatives are completed, the outcome is that you have better satisfied customers, or you have effective processes. You might have optimized inventory, or you might be able to reduce costs. So in order to improve product, processes, or organization as a whole, we might want to have some strategies based on the vision, mission, and values provided to us by executives. And for those strategies, we find some KPIs to improve and align with those strategies. And then we take strategic initiatives to improve them. And the overall outcome is the desire that we have. to improve the process or product. So let's take an example. Let's take an example of a company, I think, which we all are aware of, that is Google. So Google's vision is to provide access to world's information in one click, and their mission is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So I've tried to highlight certain words here, like they want to organize the information, and that is universally accessible. That clearly defines what they want to do. And since they want to organize and make it universally accessible, it clearly means that their strategic objective could be related to users. And their core value is they want to focus on user. So say one of the strategic objectives is to increase the reach to users. So a KPI could be a percentage of users that are using Google as a primary search engine, which clearly means that they are trying to track the market share of the product. Going forward, based on this KPI, we might take certain key strategic initiatives to improve the percentage of users and thereby increase the reach to users and thereby add to the overall organization as a whole. Let's take another example. Let's take example of customer acquisition cost as the KPI. So customer acquisition cost means how much money I'm spending to acquire a new customer. A lot of times it is required that you have a billboard ad, or you might do Google search engine optimization, or you do you redecorate and redesign your app, or you provide certain ads in social media to get more users using your application or service. So customer acquisition cost can simply be defined as a formula of total money spent on user acquisition divided by total number of unique users. That would clearly tell me how much money I'm spending on acquiring one new user. But then this is a very simple KPI because it's a simple two numbers that I'm dividing one with the other, and it gives me the customer acquisition cost. But even though it looks very simple, total spend on user acquisition might be coming from different streams or different channels. For example, how much of money I'm spending on agency fee, which means I might be engaging another agency to make calls to the users and ask them to purchase the product. Or I might be doing strategic partnership to get more consumers, or I might be spending a lot on advertising. But then the total spend would depend on how much money I have spent in a given point of time. So please note that customer acquisition cost is defined as a function of time, and it is tracked over a given period. This might be different for different KPIs that a product manager might be required to track. It is also required that we come up with a forecast. For example, my strategic initiative could be to reduce the customer acquisition cost by 10%. So if it is $10 now, by the end of the year, or by the end of the month, or by the end of the project cycle, I want the cost to come down by $1 to total $9. So how do we forecast KPIs, and how do we come up with these initiatives, which could be the projects that might be done by a project manager, or those KPIs that are monitored by product managers? So say we take the initiative that we want to reduce customer acquisition cost by 10% as an example. So there could be multiple ways to reduce that. One way could be that I find an alternative advertiser to reach out to my consumers. I might be using Instagram influencers, or I might be using social networks, or I might be participating in road shows and events to reduce the cost. Another way could be that I make more partnerships and I bring my partners, customers on my platform, and I also give away my consumers on partners' platform. So that could be a win-win for everyone. I could also have a bundling ecosystem effect. For example, StarHub gives bundles of fiber broadband and mobile together, and cable TV as well. So if you get things in a bundle, then it's cheaper to get for the consumers, and you spend less money on acquiring consumers for each and every service. Another example could be Amazon Prime membership. You get Prime TV as well as next day delivery. You could also improve on-site conversion metrics, which means that you might want to get more consumers by improving your conversions. It could also vary by business model, which means that whether you are Netflix or Amazon or Apple, your customer acquisition cost could be very, very different. For example, Netflix never markets itself on search engines or social networks. It always asks you for 1 month free trial. So their cost to acquire a new consumer is 1 month of free airtime. Whereas for Amazon, it aggressively markets on social networks and search engines like Google. And whereas for Apple, they have altogether different way to acquire new consumers. They have those massive brand following, and then they also have big showrooms where they where they showcase their products. So depending on the business model and the product you're working on, it might be very different to understand a particular KPI. Moving towards the end of the session, what is a KPI's life cycle? So a KPI starts by defining the KPI by understanding the strategic objectives and what needs to be accomplished. Then it is required to set a target. So what KPI I want to achieve over what period of time. Then is the time to plan. That means that we evaluate possible options and we analyze based on how much risks are there, how much time, what is the cost, and multiple parameters. Then we take time to execute that initiative as a part of project. At the end of the project, we assess whether there was an improvement or not. And if required, we repeat the entire cycle again to further improve. That is it from my side. I would open the floor for questions, if any.
Maya, we do have 2 questions on the chat group. Okay, I'd request Aditi and Kritika to come forward and ask this. Guys, it was a very valid one.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question is, taking to your point on KPIs as well, what are some of the ways that you can identify which streams contribute to the total spend? So one of the examples that I had was at a previous job, we were using search engine optimization and influencers and etc. How do we identify which streams contributed to engaging a certain demographic of the users?
Okay. Kritika, very good question. And the answer might depend on the business you are in. But then as a product manager, you would have a total understanding of where your users are coming from. And you would also be a custodian of the entire marketing activity that is done by the product, which means that you would go to the influencer and you would have an agreement with them that I would spend $5,000 for you to endorse this product, or I would pay you an affiliate fee of $10 every purchase that comes via you. So I think by that logic, you would be in total control of all the channels that are operating, because finally the money is going out of your wallet or out of the product's wallet. So you should be able to understand how are you acquiring the consumers, and would be able to track the spend per channel. If that is not done, then probably that is slightly mismanaged spend.
Adding to that, how much of this falls, so I understand that it does come, part of it comes to the product manager, but a lot of what you're saying seems like it's a marketing function as well. So yes. What's the play between a marketing manager and a product manager?
Yes. So I think it also depends on the organization. On certain organizations, product managers would have a say on what needs to be done as part of the product, and certain initiatives could be done altogether by marketing. So for example, if I'm a marketing person, and a way for me to reduce customer acquisition cost is to not only focus on Google search engine, but also focus on Facebook as well, then I do not need a product manager to make the decision. And as a marketing person, I would be able to create creatives for Facebook and do that. But then if I am required to improve the product by partnering with another customer or another partner, then it is required for me that I do an API integration, or I do a collaboration with them. And I think in the second case, it is required that you engage a product manager and a project manager and drive a project. So it depends on need to need and also on business cases. But for the example that I gave you, between those two scenarios, it is clear that in one, marketing can drive the initiative by itself. And in the second one, it is required for an IT team and product manager and project manager to be involved.
That was super useful. Thank you.
And Kritika, adding a bit to that, I work on a marketing platform that sends out mails to the user. So CAC is one of the KPIs that we strictly follow, and how well the product is promoted, we get a better return.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question. So my question is like, to what extent are these KPIs decided by a product manager? Like, are they fully decided by a product manager, or are there like other departments that come into play?
So depending on, I think it could be based on different businesses as well. In a typical, as I shared in my slides, the overall mission, vision, values are very essential. So, and then you need to understand based on the business model, what KPIs need to be tracked. For example, if I am tracking, if my goal is to have a Netflix penetrate in Indian market, then I would want to have KPIs designed around that rather than designed around profitability, because my current focus is customer acquisition or penetration rather than making the business profitable. So, it actually comes from senior management on what are the directions, and ideally, a product manager's job is to come up with ways to effectively measure these KPIs, and also come up with initiatives to improve these KPIs to achieve the target set by senior management.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, we have one more question from Samiksha. Samiksha, would you share it here?
Sorry.
What kind of tools could be used to measure KPIs? Samiksha, that could be dependent on your product itself. Like I said, I have a product which sends out mails. So mainly we trace who has opened our mails, or what is the journey of the mail that we are going through. How many of them opened the mail, how many of them actually clicked on the links, and how many of them purchased. So I don't think so there's a definitive set of tool. It depends from product to product.
Samiksha, let me also give you some more information. Absolutely agree with Janani that it depends from product to product. And I think most of the answers that have been shared so far depends on product to product. If you're measuring a system KPI, it might be required that you use some engineering tools where you plot nice graphs to understand how much is the error rate, how much is the downtime. It might be possible that you measure certain KPIs in Excel sheets. We use Domo, we use Prometheus, we use multiple tools to measure different kind of KPIs. And system KPIs are measured in Prometheus and Grafana, and business KPIs are typically measured and tracked in Domo in Rakuten.
Okay, thanks, Amaya. So basically, these tools are managed by the product manager themselves, or are they to be taken care by a different team altogether? So, how's like an analytics person or a data analytics or a data? So, who's actually responsible then in that case?
Yes, there would be a separate team. So in Rakuten, there is a separate team which is Domo admin, which takes care of Domo. We also have some DevOps team which takes care of those IT KPI tracking systems like Prometheus and Grafana. So there would be experts, but then since all the teams have their different needs and all products would have their different KPIs, it would be kind of collaboration between those admin teams and your own team to visualize what you actually want to visualize. So product manager would be involved, but would not work 100% on that.
Oh, okay, got it. Thank you so much, Amaya. Thank you, Janani.
We have one more question from Nikita Menon. Nikita, go ahead, please.
So hi Amaya. My question was that do you encounter situations where like KPIs for say two KPIs for product like kind of contradict each other, and if so, how do you decide which one to prioritize and which one to look at to exactly understand the performance of a product?
I think one answer is that what is the medium to long-term strategy for the product, and that would help you choose whether you want to strategize and whether you want to improve KPI 1 over KPI 2. Another way could be to understand the parameters around those KPIs, which means that if you take certain strategic initiatives, so ideally you never compare KPIs. KPIs are just numbers. What actually matters is what projects you are driving or what initiatives you are driving, and then it might be required that two initiatives might be contradicting with each other, where one is trying to increase the profitability and other is trying to increase customer satisfaction, and then they might be contradicting each other, something like that. But then in order to understand and decide, you might first look at the strategic direction from the management on what is currently the priority. Other way could be that you go back into certain frameworks are there, like pestle analysis, on where you understand the cost, risk, environmental factors, and try to understand which initiative might have a bigger impact on your consumers, and then you prioritize that.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, anyone else wants to ask questions? I see Alvina and Shrishti have a question. Shrishti, yours will answer you through the chat. It's okay. Alvina, do you want to ask this?
Yeah, sure. Do I have to on my video?
Yeah, go ahead.
It's okay. Your question is okay. So you just ask the question. It's okay.
Yeah.
Alvina.
Yeah, so I'm quite curious, like just now you gave an example of the reducing the cost by 10%, for example, about the CAC. Yeah, so how do you come up with that 10%? Because like given like we don't have much experience in this area, how do we do it?
Yes.
Yeah.
So for a associate product manager, probably these kind of targets would be set by management and would be given to associate product managers or product managers. It could also be required that you come up with certain targets on what you can achieve. Then there has to be some analysis and some planning done to understand whether that is feasible or not. For example, to give you an example, whether you could run 5K or not, you cannot just stand up and start running. You do your due diligence, how much you have run before. So whether we were able to reduce cost by 8%, 7% before, then it makes sense that we could target 10% now. So some historical data goes into that. Some practicality or some analysis of market goes into that. Some competition analysis might also go into deciding what should be the targets for this year or this quarter or this time frame.
Okay, cool. But then like, what about in the case of like a startup, for example, like it's their first time pushing their product into the market. So like how, yeah. In this case, I'm just asking, yeah.
Yes. So do you have a particular example on, are you working with a startup at the moment, and do you have a particular example that you want to discuss? Or is it
No, I don't have I don't have a particular example.
Yeah. So I think KPIs are an improvement in strategic initiatives are like giving direction to the product, and you cannot have a no direction. So which means that there has to be a strategic direction before you come up with the target. So based on your strategic direction, you identify the KPIs, and then you come up with targets to improve those KPIs. So for no matter which product we are talking about, and no matter whether it's an established multinational company or whether it's a startup, every company and every product should have a direction of what it wants to accomplish in next 6 months and next 1 year, and that is what actually determines what is going to be your target and what are the KPIs that you're going to improve. Does that help you?
Yeah. Thank you so much for the answer.
So guys, let's go back to the first question that was asked today. What's the difference between product manager, product owner, and scrum master? I think Ameya and Marinette, the people, I think you're the right people to answer this. I've given the basic difference though.
Marinette, I've been answering some questions. You want to take this one?
Ameya, take a break. Marinette, yes, please answer.
Hi. Yeah, so actually, Janani, you covered the question already regarding this, but I just want to add that actually the term product owner and scrum master are actually roles in Scrum, which is the most popular agile methodology framework. So that's why it's as more companies are adapting this Scrum methodology in agile, and it's becoming more and more common for organizations to work under this methodology. So these roles are becoming more and more popular. But to put it in a very oversimplistic way, Scrum Master can be a project manager, but not exactly apples to apples. But if you were to do an analogy, a Scrum Master would ensure that the development team and coach the development team in delivering the product, while the product owner is the one that owns the product backlog or the list of features. So there's a bit of an overlap between the role of a product owner and a product manager. So some organizations, they have a product manager as a job title, and when they do projects and it's in the doing in a Scrum methodology, then their role becomes a product owner. So they're the ones defining the requirements, owning the product backlog. So it's not apples to apples comparison, but you kind of get the difference. Yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Right, that's right. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, Surabhi, I think we have come towards the end of the session. Guys, if you have any more questions, please go through Surabhi and we will answer it. Okay?
Yeah, so just to end, I can see my screen for the feedback.